event like this to commemorate the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre, and so I want to thank him for his leadership. I want to thank all the members of the committee who showed up in a bipartisan fashion, as well as our guests. And I know Peter Jeffries is going to join us in a little bit, and we'll recognize him. But with that, I'll hand it over to Speaker McCarthy.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for being here. You know, the ranking member as well. I know I spoke to the leader. He's got a lot of things going on, but he's going to make sure he's going to be here today too. For those of you on the committee, thank you for your service. We created a select committee on China for a purpose and a reason. And the way you have carried yourself out, your character, and the work you're doing is more critical than ever, I think, at any other time as we move forward. One of our failures is not speaking with one voice. There's many things that happen in people's lifetimes that are defining. There are two things that happened that I have watched that I wish I could have been at. The fall of the Berlin Wall and Tiananmen Square. When I watched the students starting in April and why they entered the square, it was all about freedom. When they built the goddess of democracy, it looked a little like the Statue of Liberty, the definition. When I watched a young man that I've never known his name, I don't know anybody in the world who knows his name, stand in front of the tank. The tank moves left, he moves left. The tank moves right, he moves right. The reason why we don't know his name is because he's not alive today. But he knew in that moment what he was doing. He was giving his life for the idea of freedom. And to thank in the middle of the night the hundreds of thousands that got killed. Not for a revolution, but for the idea of freedom. Freedom of the press. I remember my first ability to go to Tiananmen Square, first entrance to China. I believe it was 1995. And I remember there was a sign in Tiananmen Square that had the number of minutes and the number of days to Hong Kong democratic control. And I remember being in Tiananmen Square, and some people would fly a kite, and they would tie the kite off so it would still fly, and I didn't understand. And I asked, why do they do that? And it was to say that they still stood with the students. But the kite symbolized freedom, it could still fly. And it was a soft protest to that day. And I wonder how many people today in China still know about what transpired back then. I know there are many things in life, but the idea of freedom isn't stuck to one country. It's human, that everybody craves, that everybody has the respect and the idea to speak. So it's important that we never forget the day of Tiananmen Square. It's important as lawmakers that we pass and we stand for freedom no matter where it matters around the world. So what we're doing today, I hope you understand. And I hope the world understands that when we speak here, you may see us battle about a lot of different issues. But when it comes to freedom, when it comes to China, I hope the world begins to see that we're speaking with one voice, with both sides of the aisle united together. And I know we have some guests here, and some that were even there. And I think from one standpoint, I'm excited the way Congress is handling this today. I'm excited the way we're looking towards the future and the way that we can stand up for freedom in all parts of the world. And I appreciate the chairman for allowing me to be part of this event. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for setting the tone. I think a lot of us have been talking about the meeting we had with you and Peter Jeffries, and that's a rare thing. It rarely happens on Capitol Hill. So that set the tone for the committee's work, and I want to thank Ranking Member Christian Morphy for being such an incredible partner on these issues. A friend from China told me an old joke, which is that under the CCP, the future is predictable, but it's hard to know what's going to happen in the past. And there's no better example of the CCP's obsession with rewriting history than their censorship around this week, which is the anniversary of the Tiananmen Square Massacre in 1989. In their telling, the PLA never stormed Beijing. They never crushed peaceful demonstrators under their tank treads. They never turned their guns on the best and brightest young people in China, killing thousands. But of course, all these things happened. We know they did, and we cannot let them control the past. We must remember But in our memory, we can't absolve ourselves. If the Tiananmen Square massacre is an indictment of the CCP, it's also an indictment in some ways of us. The mask slipped. We saw the CCP's true, brutal, paranoid face on live TV. And what did we do? We rewarded it. Not immediately, but in the end. We delinked human rights from trade status. We shepherded their access to the WTO. When we here in America look at Tank Man, we should feel no righteousness. His courage is remarkable because it's set against the backdrop of so many people's own cowardice. We gave the PRC diplomatic slaps on the wrist. We issued some sternly worded statements, and we went straight back to our policy of relentless economic engagement. And the message was, keep the cheap goods flowing. And if you're going to abuse human rights, just try not to get caught on camera. We told ourselves the fairy tale that as China liberalized economically, the CCP would liberalize politically. But the opposite has happened. And now, after 34 years of relentless economic engagement, what do we see? We see concentration camps in Xinjiang. We see the militarization of the South China Sea. We see a Hong Kong where over 20 people were arrested yesterday, just yesterday, simply for wearing the wrong t-shirt, holding a candle, holding 2 flowers. Anything that could possibly be interpreted as a symbol of June 4th, the CCP tries to erase from history. They're just as paranoid, just as vicious as they were in those fateful days in June 1989. And why is that? Why is Beijing so obsessed with squashing all mentions of the Tiananmen Square massacre? Because they're terrified that they will lose control of one of their most important narratives. And they're telling the Chinese people desire the safety and security of the party that the party provides far more than any pesky freedoms of conscience. And that's why CCP censors have also removed the Xitong Bridge from the map apps in China this week, just this week that happened. The site of Peng Lifa's famous Bridgeman protests in October last year that led to the White Paper movement. And Bridgeman shows that today is not just about remembering something that happened 34 years ago, it's about learning the lessons for our current time. We've had alarming reports about crackdowns on the White Paper protests around China. If the world turns its back on the peaceful White Paper protesters, Bridgeman, the CCP will know that it can still get away with brutalities like Tiananmen Square. Appeasing the CCP, and I'll end here, only emboldens the worst authoritarian instincts of this Marxist-Leninist regime. The famous Soviet dissident Alexander Solzhenitsyn may have put it best. He said, the very ideology of communism, all Lenin's teachings are that if you can take it, do so. If you can attack, strike. But if there's a wall, then retreat. The communist leaders respect only firmness and have contempt for persons who continually give in to them. It's not too late to learn the lessons of June 1989, and I can think of no firmer message than the members of this committee sitting here today in bipartisan fashion with the Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives and the Minority Leader of the U.S. House of Representatives sending a signal that we remember. We will not forget. With that, I'll turn it over to Ranking Member Christian Wolf.
Well, thank you so much, Speaker, and thank you, Chairman. Thank you for passing the mic, Speaker. Actually, this gathering reminds me of the first meeting we had in your office, which you probably remember very well. It was very unique because seldom do you see the Speaker and the Minority Leader sitting next to each other. And I remember exactly what you said, Speaker. You said, if you want to engage in partisanship, I've got committees for that. If you want to get something done.
Wasn't that an off-the-record comment?
Not anymore. If you want to get something done, this is a committee where we're going to get something done. And thank you, Chairman Gallagher, for your incredible leadership, and thank you to all of you for your service. A philosopher once said, the secret to happiness is freedom, and the secret to freedom is courage. And today I brought a picture of precisely that scene of courage that the Speaker described and the Chairman alluded to, which is the scene that is indelibly imprinted in all of our minds about Tiananmen Square. This man standing in front of that tank, and people had a choice on that day. Do you stand with that man who stood up to power, or do you stand with that tank and the brutal Chinese Communist Party which sought to quash freedom? Many, like you two and others, stood with that man. And so many Chinese people were exiled or worse for standing with that man. Then there are a lot of people who stood with that tank and stood with the CCP and thought business could just proceed as usual. And we see what has happened in the intervening time. And so today, we have to remember that when Chairman Xi Jinping says he will, quote, crack down hard on subversion and separatist activities by those deemed as, quote, enemy forces, he is telling the world that the CCP will send those tanks again against anyone who stands up for freedom. And he will deem his own people enemies of the state. We've seen this in Xinjiang with the genocide of the Uyghur people. We've seen this in Hong Kong with the suppression of people who seek freedom. And we see this, of course, in Tibet with the persecution of the Tibetan people. And so today, we say with one voice, in a bipartisan fashion, no more. No more. We are going to speak for freedom. We're going to stand with anybody who does the same. And so I look forward to not only remembering this day, but using this day as a call to action. That is what this committee is about. And so thank you, Speaker, thank you, Chairman, thank you to all of you for joining in acting and not just remembering based on what happened in June of 1989. Thank you.
Thank you. We are honored to be joined by two very important guests this evening. I should note that Diamond always reminds me that my pronunciation of names, my pronunciation of Mandarin is terrible. I spent my adult life learning Arabic, the wrong language, so I apologize. But Mr. Hung Jing Lee has made it easy for me because he handed me his business card and he goes by Henry Lee now. So yeah. Henry is much easier than Hung Jing. Yeah. But Mr. Lee is an analyst and researcher on China's economy and politics. He was actually one of the student leaders in Tiananmen Square in the spring of 1989. And after the Tiananmen Massacre, Mr. Lee was arrested and jailed for a year. And since then, he's worked with numerous China scholars and NGOs to support democracy and human rights in China. He's the founder and CEO of the Informatics and Strategies Institute. Our next guest is Wei Jingcheng, one of the leaders of the democracy, who was also at our first hearing as well. We were graced by his presence. He was one of the leaders of the Democracy Wall movement in China during the late 1970s. Unlike other Democracy Wall posters, Wei actually signed his name. And for speaking his mind, he spent 16 years in Chinese prisons, 16 years. He has been called the Nelson Mandela of China, and for his activism, he has received too many human rights awards to count, but I think perhaps the title that best sums him up is simply the longest running thorn in the Chinese Communist Party's side. And when Wei was in prison, he continued to harass high-ranking CCP officials through the mail, through the written word. And from his cell on November 3rd, 1989, he wrote to Deng Xiaoping, haranguing him for the massacres in Tiananmen Square earlier that year. The letter begins, Dear Deng Xiaoping, I've written to you so many times now that I'm probably beginning to get on your nerves, and you're wondering, why can't this guy just sit in prison quietly? For nearly 50 years, Wei has not sat anywhere quietly. He's been a consistent, inspiring voice for freedoms in China, and he has been a pain in the rear, let's say, to generations of Chinese Communist Party leaders. His courage is very inspiring. So, with the caveat that when Leader Jeffries gets here, we're going to recognize him for his statement. I will turn it over first to Wei Jingcheng, and then to Mr. Lee for his remarks. So, sir. Oh. Speaker, you're very good at logistics.
很抱歉啊，我得通过翻译讲，大家需要多一点耐心。
I apologize. You have to listen to me through a translator.
1989年的天安门的事件不是突然出现的，它有一个发展的历史。
The 1989 massacre wasn't a sudden occurrence. It has a history.
大家可能都知道，60年代的末期，中国在早期啊，发生了一个大的灾难，中国饿死了几千万人。
You might know that in 1960 in China there was a great famine that tens of millions of people starved to death.
那次的饿死人呢，很多的老百姓，包括知识分子，开始对共产党产生了怀疑。
That was the beginning when the ordinary Chinese people and many intellectuals begin to question the Chinese Communist Party.
共产党改变了一下政策，给了老百姓一点点的自由，这样呢，中国度过了那次经济的危机。
The Chinese Communist Party gave just a little bit of freedom to the people, so they could produce enough food to pass this crisis.
1966年，毛泽东发动了有名的文化大革命，在这场文化大革命中呢，毛泽东又继续恢复了苏联的那套共产主义的这个经济和政治制度。
In 1966, Chairman Mao Zedong started the Marxist-Leninist tradition that originated in Soviet Union, the repressive tactic returned to China.
他这个做法呢，在10年之中把中国的经济搞垮了，而且老百姓也感到非常痛苦，受到压迫，想要反抗。所以在70年代末就产生了这个民间的这个反抗运动。
During these 10 years of Cultural Revolution, people were suffering a great deal and longed for more freedom. And in the end of 1970s, that created a condition of resistance.
这个反抗的运动呢，有很多人提出来，这个马克思主义可能是错的，共产党可能是错的，这个就形成了那个民主墙运动。
Many question that Marxism could be wrong, and the Chinese Communist Party could be wrong, and that created the democracy war movement.
一旦人们的思想脱离了马克思主义的控制，人们开始思考，是不是要学习西方的制度呢？西方人好像过得比我们好。这个时候，共产党在人民群众的压力之下，也不得不改变政策，这就是邓小平的后来的改革开放政策。
When people start questioning and then ask, why do we not study the system from the West? That the Westerners are living a better life than we do. That create a condition that force Deng Xiaoping's reform.
这场思想的解放呢，在中国社会上酝酿了10年，整个的80年代，大家都在这个思想越来越开放，包括西方的思想慢慢进入到中国。
During the 80s, this liberation of thinking created more chances to learn about other system and about the West.
这个时候，共产党感到了威胁，他们觉得继续开放下去，继续让思想这么发展下去，那么共产党的统治就要垮台了。
The Chinese Communist Party began to feel afraid because the continuation of liberation thinking would ultimately bring to the downfall of the Chinese Communist Party.
由于人们要求自由、要求民主的这个想法太强烈了，所以在1989年就爆发了一场民主运动。于是共产党就感到没有其他办法了，不能说服老百姓，只能出动军队来屠杀老百姓。
This created the Tiananmen protest movement in 1989. The Chinese Communist Party felt that they cannot persuade the people. The only way they could repress the people is by opening the guns.
据共产党内部的统计，光在北京市就杀死了超过1万人。
Just the death in the city of Beijing alone is 10,000.
在这场屠杀之后呢，美国政府扮演了不是很光彩的角色。
After this massacre, the government of the United States did not play a glorious role.
美国的制裁停留在口头上，而且很快就派了特使去向邓小平通报情况，表示两国还是要继续友好。
Sanctions were mainly words, and very quickly, special envoy was sent to Beijing to improve relations.
在那之后呢，中国和美国的经济发展的还很快。
After that, the economic relations between China and the United States improved very rapidly.
人们的生活水平得到了一定的提高。
The living standard of the people were raised.
加上严厉的镇压措施，所以在那之后20多年，老百姓的反抗就是变得很微弱，只有一些少数的异议人士还在坚持反抗，很微弱。
The improvement of the economy plus very repressive tactics have led to very weak resistance.
但是现在最近这几年，中国的经济变得非常糟糕。
These few years, the economy has deteriorated and resistance has gone up.
习近平用非常高压的政策来镇压社会上的各种不满。
Xi Jinping used high pressure tactic of repression have led to a widespread dissatisfaction.
这个形势很像是文化革命后期或者1989年的形势，就是人民群众非常不满，而政府已经没有办法处理了。
This situation currently is very similar to late 1980s when there's widespread dissatisfaction and the government has no real method to satisfy the people, then resistance.
大家注意到中国社会上发生了一场白纸运动，然后又有这个各种抗议活动，非常频繁。
You might have noticed the white paper movement is widespread and all kinds of resistance are sprouting.
而这个形势呢，加上经济下滑，和1989年的情况非常相似。
That coupled with the downturn of the economy is very similar to the situation in 1989.
而且共产党内部就是统治集团内部的斗争呢，也变得非常激烈，这和1989年情况也很相似。
The internal power struggle among the elites, among the communist elite, is fierce, and that too is very similar to 1989.
所以中国很快要发生一个巨大的变化。那么美国社会、国际社会怎么样应对这个变化？现在应该开始思考这个问题。
There will be great changes in China. The question is that is the United States ready to face that change? This is the time to consider how to face that change.
我注意到这个委员会，他们这个委员会在做着很多很重要的工作，也很有效果。
I have observed that this community have done many good things and very effective things.
但是很多中国人让我告诉你们，让我传话给你们说，你们做的还很不够，对共产党的威胁还太小，还不足以对中国人民构成帮助。
Many Chinese people have sent words to me to send this committee a message that even though you have done well, it is not enough. You are not creating enough pressure on the Chinese government.
所以我希望有一个新的政策，美国有一个新的政策能够改变中国，否则的话，如果美国不能改变中国，那么习近平可能也想改变美国。
I wish the American people would consider changing to a new policy. If you cannot change China, then Xi Jinping will try to change you.
美国人可能觉得习近平太狂妄了，他做不到。 但是习近平不这么认为，他可能觉得他有办法做到。
Many people consider Xi Jinping cannot do this, and he is wishful thinking. But that is not how Xi Jinping thinks. He thinks he could do it.
他会知道一些危险，威胁到台湾，威胁到美国，甚至渗透到美国来，掌握美国的政治，这都是有可能的。
He can create a danger and pressure. He can pressure Taiwan. He can pressure the United States. He can even penetrate into different level of the United States. These are the things he could do.
所以我希望跟大家更多的合作。
I wish to cooperate with you much more.
Thank you. The message you convey from the Chinese people is the same message I get from the speaker. You haven't done enough. With that, I recognize Mr. Henry Lee.
Thank you. Thank you very much to the speaker, Kevin McKenzie, to the chairman, Mike Gallagher, and to the ranking member, Rajmo.
Raja.
And
We can't even pronounce it.
okay. And to all these committee members to host this event is very important, not only for Chinese, not only for Chinese people, it's also for the world. So I think, Mr. Wei Jingsheng just talked many points of what I have already wrote. So, but I think I have to change. So first, in 34 years ago, when Tiananmen Massacre happened, I was there. In the whole evening until the early morning, I left the Tiananmen Square by 7. Just a little bit before 7 a.m. is the deadline for the PLA member to control the square. So I was one of the last group people were pushed out from there. So when I get back in that time, I was a senior student in Tsinghua University. And when I get back to my condo, so all my shirt was blood. It's not mine, it's my colleagues. So from there, so you can feel it's how hard to pass through that. So in that time, I was 22 years old. And right now I'm 56. So since 34 years passed away. So however, I think just like Mr. Wei Jingsheng said, so all our Chinese people, we still want to get democracy. We still want to protect our rights. So honestly, I think all our modern fighting for the democracy is from Mr. Wei Jingsheng. Since when we grew up, when I was in the high school, I heard his fifth modernization. So his famous point. So since he said Deng Xiaoping covered four factors of modernization, but he said it's not enough. Since without democracy, China is not a normal modern country. So we need democracy. From there, I think we start try to understand why. And during the 1980s, so I call it the best period of the CCP period. Since in that time we get a lot of resources, we can learn a lot of things from the Western country, including the democracy system. So that it lead to 1989 student movement. So after that, so in that time, Deng Xiaoping used to say, we can kill 200,000 people, and then it will give us 20 years the power. We can hold power for 20 years. Yeah, he did it. CCP did it. Right now, 34 years passed away. So they still on the power, right? So, and the situation of human rights and democracy was worse and worse, become worse and worse. You can see, ranking member, just mentioned, so just so many people were put in jail, and so many people were put in the labor camp. So much more than 1980s. So, and Xi Jinping is not only trying to ruling the Chinese people, just like Ms. Wei Jingsheng said, he is trying to ruling the world. That's true. That's true. Since you can see, he has so many, he created so many concepts, try to do lots of things by helping the other country, helping other country. It's not true. He just deliver the death to all these countries. So, but right now, the China's economy dropped down so much that he has not got the power as before. So this is the chance. And so many Chinese people, right now they are struggling on their daily life. So right now, so many people against him. So, but they just scared by the PLA, by the police. So that's the reason they are still in power. So I think right now, if our Chinese people, just like a cold war, or we didn't dare to do something, it's not true. It's also not true. So just like you just mentioned the bridge man. So 34 years ago, we have the tank man, including myself. We dare to give our life for the freedom, for the democracy. So I think right now we still have so many people dare to stand up, just like it just happened last year. At the end of last year, the white paper movement. So many young people stand on the street. And also, I think they are much more braver than us, since we never, in 1989, we never step down CCP. But this time, only many police, many protesting points they call, step down Xi Jinping, step down CCP. So they have already found the system is totally corrupted, totally wrong. So they need the new democracy, just like the fresh air. So I think at this point, so I appreciate you host this event to deliver a very strong message to us, to Chinese people, and to the world. So I think right now, all these Chinese people, we need to know the truth. To know the truth. Since the propaganda of CCP, they have already brainwashed many people. And plus, they're scared. So that not so many people dare to stand up. So that your signal will encourage them to stand up. To stand up. It's very important. Second, I think don't be afraid to say you don't need to say we will not expect or persuade to the regime change. I think many public speakers, many politicians, when they deal with Chinese government, they always say, oh yeah, we didn't try to you regime change. We can let you know. Since it's internal event. No, it's not internal. Human rights is not internal. So Massacre is not internal. So then, I think as the leader of the democracy world, United States got to stand up to say it's not internal. If you did this, we will say no. So, and also, there is a very important thing, is don't say that. You deliver a wrong message to Chinese people. This is very, very important. And I think And to the end, so I will share a story. It's a short story. It happened in the lockdown of the pandemic. Yeah, there was a group of police trying to arrest young people since he refused to test to have the CPR test. And since they were locked in the apartment, and then the police just threatened him. So that if you didn't follow us, if you didn't cooperate with us, your generation will be affected. And your son, your daughter, and your grandson, granddaughter will also affected. So the young man just stand there and said, "Thank you, but believe me, I'm just the last generation." I think we believe that. So I think the democratic China will become our country in our generation. We believe that. So we need help from all of you. Thank you.
Thank you both for your bravery and for your words. I know the speaker's already stayed past his time, so why don't we just open it up for discussion and questions, and then the speaker may have to leave, and the minority leader will come at some point and destroy us.
There was an interesting article in the New York Times about youth unemployment, and it seems to me the discontent of unemployed youth in China is a ticking time bomb. And what I found striking is Xi Jinping's reaction. Instead of promising his people's prosperity, he's using language like "eat bitterness." He's glorifying hardship. Almost, he's resigned to a world without economic growth, without prosperity, which is a shift. So, can you comment on the politics of youth unemployment in China?
Yes, I think they have already made their decision to try. They call the Taiwan, the United Union. Taiwan is the core value for the country, for the party. And honestly, I think most Chinese people, they understand it's not the core value of the country, it's the core value of himself. So he wants to build up his legacy as the great king in the history. So that's the reason he wants to give something in the history. But before, I think 10 years ago, when he was not the president, he was not in this way. Just because he got the power, so then he wants to move forward. He dared to try to challenge, even for they lost the oldest cities, so they don't care. He didn't care. He even I heard he even planned to move the capital to Xi'an. Xi'an is the northwest city. So he even dare to do that. So he is very dangerous. He is very dangerous. So yeah, that's what I heard, and also I think Chinese people, many of them, they know.
哦，你提这个问题非常有意思。
Your question is very interesting.
任何国家如果失业的人太多了，社会都产生动荡。
In any country, when the unemployment rate is too high, there's always instability.
而且在中国现在是有几千万的知识分子、大学毕业生，他们在失业。
Now, the high unemployment rates among university graduates.
中国历史上有无数次的革命，这些革命里面，大多数都是由这些失业的知识分子领导的。
In China, there has been thousands of instability and movements, and they were always led by unemployed intellectuals.
那么如何解决这个困难？习近平不可能提供更多的工作机会。那么如何解决这困难呢？对很多国家来说，发动一场战争是解决这些困难的一个可以参考的方法。
Now, how do you solve the unemployment problems? Since Xi Jinping cannot provide more job opportunity, the alternative is to initiate a war.
而且现在中国军队已经足够强大，不能小看它。
Now, the Chinese Communist military is very strong. You cannot underestimate.
而且看上去，很多中国人都看上去，习近平是在准备一场战争。
Most Chinese people, in their observation, they believe Xi Jinping is preparing for war.
但是中国里边也有很多的官员和军官、高级军官反对对台湾发动战争。
But there are also many the Chinese Communist officials, some of them high level, that they are against.
最近习近平把他们之中的这个领袖人物给抓起来了。
The leader of this anti-war movement was recently arrested.
所以战争可能性可以说越来越高了。
Since his arrest, the possibility of war is elevated.
Mr. Johnson.
So obviously China is an authoritarian regime, and so the media is tightly controlled, and the ability of people to tell their stories, to engage in public assembly is tightly controlled. So for the everyday man or woman in China, is there, for somebody my age, say 46 years old, what would be their views of Tiananmen Square?
Many people, they don't know. Many young people, I think many years ago, I VOA gave me an interview for the Tiananmen Massacre, and the reporter just made the interview. She just mentioned she was in close to 30. She just asked me. She said, "Oh, Mr. Lee, so why I didn't heard about this story?" She from Shanghai, and she just asked me why my parents didn't tell me this story, this sad story, so terrible story. And I said, since in China, if you want to do something against the government, so it's dangerous. But if you know the truth, you will, as a young people, you will stand up against the government. All these parents, most of these parents, they don't want to give their son, their daughter's life for this movement or for the new China. So that's the reason you parents just protect it. But the situation is changing. Everybody knows there is a great war on the internet, great war. The Chinese government said it there. And right now, China, they have so many cameras, CCTV, and they have the recognized tool, just like they can recognize your face, your voice, even your body movement. So they can recognize you. They can arrest you right away. Nowhere you can hide. So looks like the government is so strong, right? However, there is several months ago, there is a very famous IT engineer. His name is Ruan Xiaohuan. He was sentenced for 7 years in jail. Right now, he is in the processing appeal. So why he was arrested? Since he developed the cross-Great Wall software, and he distributed this software online. And also, as well, he also wrote lots of paper to introduce the Tiananmen Massacre. So he posted online. He is only one people. He fight with the Chinese policemen for more than 12 years. he openly laughed at the policeman. You cannot catch me. So it's free. So even after he was arrested 1 year, his wife just know he was like a famous guy in the night. Yeah, you can see. This is our Chinese. We are so proud of him. So, but we are among all these fighters. So, yeah, I think they can, CCP, they are so strong, but they cannot even make even one mistake to control the power. Just one is enough, just like the Romania dictatorship. So it just like one mistake. So it's done.
Jake?
Thank you. Mr. Jingsheng, what do you think is the most important thing Congress could do to convince Xi Jinping that any kind of attempt to change the status quo with Taiwan would be a disaster?
我想对于习近平来说，他现在最担心的是2件事情。
For now, there are two things Xi Jinping is worried about.
一件事情呢，就是说，国内的老百姓会造反，所以对中国的老百姓的反抗行动进行给一些实质性的支持，这是对习近平威胁最大的。
The number one worry for Xi Jinping is the possibility of Chinese people rebelling. Now, if any concrete effort you can give to help the people to rebel would be the greatest threat to Xi Jinping's rule.
我觉得第二件事就是美国可以做的很重要的事情，就是对中国采取一种对等的政策。
The second most important thing the U.S. Congress can do is to set up a way of countering the Chinese Communist Party.
过去20多年，美国给了中国很多优惠的政策，促使中国发展得很快，也促使了共产党稳定下来。
The last 20 years, the United States have given the Chinese Communist Party many benefits, which allow the Chinese Communist Party to stabilize rule and become strong.
我们中国人管这个叫做美国给共产党输血。
We Chinese people call that the America is mainlining blood into the bloodstream of the Chinese Communist Party.
如果还有另外一个很重要的一个，就是在媒体方面也应该采取对等的政策。如果中国不允许这个美国的记者进入中国，那么美国也应该不允许中国的记者进入美国。
In media, there's the important thing that the United States can do is to set up a system that would counter what the Chinese Communist Party is doing. For instance, if the PRC would not let American journalists to go to China, then the United States should not let Chinese journalists come to the United States.
因为中国对美国这些记者的威胁，不仅是减少了美国的记者，而且使得很多的记者不敢说实话。
This pressure that the Chinese government put on journalists not only make their life difficult, but make them afraid to speak out.
所以说，这个在新闻媒体方面的对等政策，我觉得是第一重要的政策。
In media, in journalism, we consider this is the most important thing to do to make the position more equalized.
一方面让美国人民能够了解更多中国的真实情况，另一方面呢， 也使得中国人民能够更多的了解外国的情况。
If the medias are loosened up, then the people in China will learn more about the West, and similarly for American people to learn more about
我
China.
想这是促使中国能够和平的演变的一个非常重要的做法。
Knowledge will be a very important help to peaceful evolution.
中国反正要变了，如果我们不能促使它和平演变，那个地方可能会发生暴乱。
It's definite that China will change, but if we cannot help China to change peacefully, then it will be changed violently.
We have at least 3 members that want to speak. We have 3 minutes until votes, so we're going to try and get through as much as possible. Ms. Cheryl. And the press presumably has questions too.
Okay, so quickly, in 2022, we saw some of the largest pro-democracy protests under the zero COVID policies that we've seen since the 80s. And I'm wondering now that many of those restrictions have been lifted, what is happening in the aftermath with many of those movements. And it seems as if a lot of the supply chain disruptions caused by that have negatively impacted Chinese businesses. And is there some sense with some of the powerful businesses pushing back against the government because of some of what that's done to their ability to sell their products worldwide?
Yes. Okay. Yes, I think you just mentioned so what we call the white paper movement. So first, many of all these activists were arrested, and some of them were released, but several of them still in jail right now. So we didn't know where they are. So first, second, so after they lifted all this restriction, that's true. The China's economy they tried to rebuild the business like back to 2019. However, it's not easy right now. Just like the French China, the supply chain move out. Many of them move out. That's the reason. Recently, there are so many employment people, so they cannot get a job. Just like for the young people between the age from 16 to 28, in this age is more than 20% in the employment. So it's a very, very serious situation. And so right now the comeback business is almost on the just like a restaurant business, and even the shopping mall is not good. It's still very, very low, and for high tech manufacturer very low. So that's the reason. It's currently the big challenge for Xi Jinping is should be recall the business, rebuild it back. But right now, I think just like Ms. Wei Jingsheng said, right now it's not on its top priority. Its top priority is still try to first hold the power, its power. Second, try to do something against just like Taiwan or something. Try to transfer its pressure out. Try to do that. So that's what my observation maybe 老魏。
您在观察中国的时候，有一件事上是美国和中国完全不同的。
When you are observing China and the United States, there's one thing, they are completely opposite.
美国是民主制度，所以美国的政治家要听老百姓说话。
America is a democracy. American politicians have to listen to the people.
中国是专制制度，所有的老百姓，包括那些企业家、那些大企业，都要听共产党说话。
China is an autocracy. All its people and including the businessmen and the entrepreneurs, the big business, they all have to listen
当那些
to
美
the
国
government.
当那些美国的企业家说他们会去影响中国政府的时候，你千万不要相信。
If American business leaders tell you that they will go to China and influence the leaders in China, don't believe them.
实际上是中国政府要求他们来影响美国的政治家。
The reality is that the Chinese government want American businessmen to influence the politician of the United States.
而且他们会乖乖的来做，因为他们怕丢掉钱。
And the American businessmen will be very obedient because they are very afraid of losing their profit.
Mr. Benjamin.
With the CCP operates like every other totalitarian government that in history, which is control the information, total control of the information, so that they're the only ones that do it. If Congress was able to find a way where the Chinese people could actually communicate amongst themselves without interference from the CCP, where would you rate that as far as importance in trying to bring about change in China?
I think it's very high. Since just like the star trend, Elon Musk's star trend. So suppose technically it will be a solution, since you don't need to try to cross the Great Wall. But Elon Musk, he has already, I think, stand with the CCP government, just like recently divided Shanghai.
But suppose there's something else, not Elon Musk, right?
Okay.
And you don't need equipment on the ground to make it work. If the Chinese people were able to communicate amongst themselves and get access to information, how important is that to bring about change?
Critically important.
Okay. So it's something that Congress could actually fund.
Yes.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Like most of them.
Yeah.
Dan, and then we all have to leave in probably 10 minutes.
Well, thank you for helping put a face on these events. Very important for us as a committee. I believe that change in China will happen. And sorry, I have allergies really bad, but will happen through the people. And I think we're all getting to the same point here. If we saw a rebellion to the COVID restrictions and change of official policy because of the people, if we're seeing decline in the economy, impacting the people, that's going to spark, we're seeing change happening there. I guess, what more could we do to help the people with that change towards peace that we all want?
我想有2点可以做。第一，减少帮助共产党。
Two things you can do. Number one, stop helping the Chinese Communist Party.
第二就是说，如果你不能直接去帮助国内的这些反抗者，那你至少可以来帮助在海外的这些从事反抗活动的这些异议人士。
The second thing is that if it's difficult to help the people inside China, then you should help the freedom fighters outside of China.
我非常遗憾地告诉你，现在美国政府对海外的这些反抗人士的帮助是0。
I very regretfully have to tell you that the American government help to freedom fighter outside of China is 0.
这是共产党努力了很多年才达到的目标。
The Chinese Communist Party have worked very hard for many years and they have succeeded.
Questions from the press, and votes have gone off. Apparently, we don't have the same buzzers in old rooms like this that we do in our normal rooms.
The lights work.
Yeah, well, there you go. You understand what this means.
Absolutely.
Just the religious persecution of believers, Christians, Catholics. What more would you like to see done from the U.S. to help them?
Okay, I plug the committee's work first. We had a very serious hearing on the ongoing Uyghur genocide. A lot of policy recommendations came out of that. We just unanimously endorsed a set of policy recommendations designed to not only shine a light on the crimes against humanity occurring in the Xinjiang Autonomous Region, but also take legislative action. So, for example, one thing we're looking at is the this loophole in the is this the microphone? I'm trying to speak. It's over hand to me. Which it violates the intent, if not the letter, of the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act. And so I want to thank the ranking member for his good work on the policy recommendations. But I don't know if our outside guests have any thoughts on what we can do to shine a light on religious persecution in China, which, as you alluded to, is not just the Uyghurs; it's a variety of groups.
我觉得宗教问题不可能单独受到改善。如果我们在各个方面都给共产党压力的话，那么在宗教问题上我们给他压力才是有效果。如果我们再继续帮助中国共产党去发展它的经济，那我不觉得共产党你要改变宗教，共产党会向你让步。
You cannot help religion singularly. If you give pressure all across the board, then religion would be also helped.
Henry, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah, that's right. And recently, I think just last 2 weeks ago, there is another Muslim massacre were held up. So in Yunnan or some province, and that one has more than 100 years of history. But it's just.
And EWTN's viewers might be curious to learn that the CCP is actually rewriting parts of the Bible, part of the New Testament, changing key passages to suggest that the authority of God is subservient to the authority of man. Most people, I just don't think are aware that this is happening right now.
Whole new level of heresy there.
Yeah, indeed. So the famous scene when people encourage Jesus to stone the sinful woman, of course he says the famous words that he is without sin cast the first stone. The ending is different in the CCP version of that story. Much different.
It didn't need a remake.
Yeah, exactly. Any other questions from the press? Yes, sir.
Chairman Gallagher and after hearing thoughts from Mr. Lee and Mr. Wright, what is your thinking about the next step that company would take after hearing their thoughts?
Well, I'll just briefly, and I'll turn over to the ranking member. I think what we started to do with our last hearing, and what we're going to do in our next couple of hearings, is look at the complicated aspect of our economic interdependence with China and how we can de-risk or selectively decouple. You've heard about the role that American business plays sometimes in encouraging the worst impulses of the Chinese Communist Party. So this committee is going to look for a thoughtful but strong way that we can put some guardrails on that economic relationship to make sure that we are not subsidizing genocide or subsidizing the Chinese military's modernization. And it's very difficult, it's very complex, as Roger and I thought through, but that's where we're going to turn a lot of our attention.
I approve that message.
There you go. Probably one more question before we all have to go vote. Yes, sir?
It just produced a documentary on election July. What is your estimate of July's prospects in the
I can say something. I think, it's in Hong Kong's movement, I learned 2 years ago or 3 years ago, in that time, they started moving, the movement they call the Be Water. They try to decentralize or something. And I believe Mr. Lai right now, he must rethink about that. Since we know each other and we respect each other, but right now we have to make sure. So just like Mr. Wei Shen said, so if China has no democrat, then no democratic system, then you cannot expect any freedom. So for Hong Kong, for Uyghurs, for Tibetans, So anybody for Taiwan. So that's the reason the only one way we can get a solution is change China. China become a democracy country so that everything got to be resolved.
Not just that, members of the committee recently went to the UK and we had discussions with members of the UK government about what more they can do, we can help them do, because of course Jimmy Lai has a British passport, he's entitled to rights as a British citizen, and the government in some cases refuses to recognize that point. So I think merely by shining a light on the case, we can have an impact as legislators. And I would submit to you that in some meaningful sense, Jimmy Lai, who sits in prison, is freer than a lot of our captains of industry who find themselves silenced for fear of provoking the Chinese Communist Party. So it's something like, particularly on a day like yesterday, that we can't predict what's happening. So with that, thank you to our special outside guests. Thank you all.
I know you Okay, thank you.
A Russian man claiming to hold top-level secrets about Russian advanced bombers has just turned up at the U.S. southern border, seeking asylum. The man claims to have been an engineer at a production facility over in the city of Kazan, and he says that he possesses top-secret information about the White Swan Tu-160, which is the most advanced bomber in the Russian arsenal. U.S. border officials, they interviewed the man, and they determined that his story was in fact credible and eventually passed him off to the FBI, who are still in the process of interrogating him right now. However, analysts have pointed out that the fact that the story was even leaked to the public is an indication that perhaps the American government is encouraging other Russians who also hold top-level secrets to also escape to America. And if you thought that was interesting, well then you should click on that button below this video and check out Epic TV, one of the best no-censorship video platforms on the internet. On there you will find awesome programs like American Thought Leaders.
We've now been, for 2 years, trying to obtain the unredacted emails. We're down to the last 50 pages. So that's where all the incriminating evidence is.
Crossroads.
One of the big things happening right now is what's taking place with Russia and China.
Counterpunch.
You will see information you've never seen anywhere else.
Facts Matter. I'm your host, Roman from the Epoch Times. Stay informed, and most importantly, stay free. As well as a plethora of great documentaries, wholesome movies that you can enjoy with your whole family.
If I reach 1 hour, I accomplish something.
Cooking programs, and my absolute favorite, programs about traditional art and traditional music, which can honestly uplift your mood and fill you with hope for the future. And the best thing about Epic TV, at least in my opinion, is that there's no corporate backing and there's no allegiance to some anti-American agenda.
How dare you come to this peaceful community and try to scam these people? What the hell are you talking about?
But rather, it's just good, honest, wholesome content that's based in truth and tradition.
I saw it. It was incredible.
Something that you can actually sit down with your whole family and enjoy, knowing that some ideology is not about to be pushed upon you.
And who's fighting it? We're fighting it here at Epoch Times, and we need to keep bringing you the news.
And so again, if you'd like to check out Epic TV, just click on that button below this video. You and your family will absolutely love it.